first off, let me read the scriptures here. Matthew chapter 26, verse 26. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and brake it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink ye all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. So we've got to be really careful about this. First off, this is not just a continuation of the Passover. It's after supper. After the Passover was completed, Jesus did this communion, okay? He said, when you eat of this bread, I want you to think of my body. Now, I'm going to give you the Tony Brewer version of this. Bread by the ancients was considered a gift from the gods. And think about how miraculous it would have looked. You can take some water, some dough, and throw it in an earthen pot, and you have just a very small amount. And then you keep coming back and you check on it, and once the germ gets into that dough and it starts fermenting, it grows orders of magnitude larger. In other words, from the ancients' perspective, we've got a miracle taking place here, because there's no way I can have this much volume of food from what we put in this earthen pot. And then it has a divine nature because it affects everything around it. You can take a little bitty piece of that sourdough and you can put it into a very large lump of dough that is quote unquote dead, and that divinity, that germ of life will spread, and it will activate your larger dough, and the process just keeps going. It's almost as if it's a never-ending source of food. And Jesus said, when you think about eating of this bread, which is a gift from God, which is sustaining your life, you think about my body. And I think the reason we're to draw bridge those two ideas, we're to make that connection. Connection is like the word I couldn't come up with. The reason we're to make that connection is because we would not be alive if Jesus had not have died on the cross. Now, let me briefly explain that. Hopefully this doesn't take the rest of the podcast, because I don't want to get stuck on this. We typically think in the Garden of Eden that, well, man died spiritually. No, man didn't die, okay? Now, there was a spiritual separation between God and Adam. In other words, he wasn't in the garden with the presence of God like he was after the fall, before the fall. Strike that, reverse it. But you get what I'm saying. Genesis, God says, the day wherein thou eatest thereof. In fact, we'll just turn over. It's Genesis chapter 2, I think, verse 17. Genesis 2:17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Now, if I were to tell you, we'll take Reginald Perry here because he's the last comment that I see. We'll take Reginald Perry. Reginald Perry is going to, he owns a lawn mowing business, and he has been contracted to mow my yard. And the contract, I'm not going to give him money up front, not because I don't trust him, just because I'm old fashioned and I want to pay when the job's done. So here's what I tell Reginald. Reginald, look, I understand that you like getting paid for the season, but I don't like paying for the season. But I will be very religious and dependable. The day wherein you mow my yard, you shall surely be paid. Now, Friday comes around, he mows my yard at 8 in the morning. Now, I'm not home. When I come home from work at 6 in the afternoon, I see my yard mowed. What do I do? When do I pay Reginald? You are being picked on, Reginald. I feel like I'm being picked on. You are. You were the last guy in the comment section. It's like being in the front row at church whenever the preacher's preaching, especially if you're in his line of sight. It's just, Anyway, so when does Reginald expect his money? According to what I said, when am I contractually bound to pay Reginald? Before the end of the day Friday. Before the end of the day Friday. Oh, it's a good question. Is crackers in culinary terms the same as bread? Well, yes, but crackers have leaven. So crackers, like you can't put saltine crackers on the Lord's Supper table. Now, have you done that in the past? If you have, just tell God you're sorry. God's not going to strike you down from heaven. Just don't do that no more. Get some unleavened bread. Go Google recipe. We make our unleavened bread here. In fact, my wife makes it. She does a pretty good job. And quite frankly, after the services, all the little kids get to running around. They get to have snacks. Because the bread in and of itself is not holy. What we do with it is holy. Anyway, so back to Reginald. When is Reginald expecting to be paid? He's expecting to be paid, and I'm honor bound by my word to pay him within the day of Friday. Now, probably we should have said, well, look, Friday by end of business day. Well, then that's even more specific. But I think we all understand the day wherein thou mowest my yard, thou shalt surely be paid. Now, then if Reginald mows my yard, the day wherein he mowed my yard, he's expecting to be paid, as well he should be. Now, the day wherein thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Why do you think Adam and Eve covered their nakedness and ran and hid? Because they felt vulnerable. They came face to face with their own mortality because they understood what death was and they understood punishment. So they know they're going to die. Why didn't God kill them like he said he would? God said, I'm going to kill you. All right? You will die. Before the foundation of the world, according to Ephesians chapter 3, God purposed in his heart to send the second member of the Godhead to die. Adam was supposed to die, but Jesus died. Why? So Adam and Eve could live and reproduce. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, there's an interesting verse. For the love of Christ constraineth us, for we thus judge, that if one died for all, then we're all dead. So I want you to picture, and I promise you this has to do with the Lord's Supper. I want you to picture a circuit board with billions upon billions upon billions of distinguishably different points of light. Now that circuit board is how God sees creation. Remember what the book of Isaiah said. He sees the beginning from the end. He sees it all at once. God is not bound by time, space, or matter. So God says, let there be light, and all of this springs up into existence with all these multiplied millions and billions of distinguishably different points of light. Those represent souls. And then Adam, as soon as you flip the switch and create the circuit, then the fuse blows and the circuit and the breaker trips because Adam ate the fruit. You see, when Adam and Eve partook of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, They were supposed to die. Therefore, all of the ancestors they would have produced, all of the kin that would have flowed from their loins, also ceased from existence. We understand this concept. Fahrenheit 451. There's a Ray Bradbury short story about time travelers. And they go back in time and they kill a dinosaur, but the problem is they messed up their calculations and they stepped off the calculated path and they killed an animal that was not supposed to be killed, and it set off a chain of events that rewrote the entirety of the world. And when they came back, all of the people where they were speaking a different language. They looked different. They acted different. So, but the point is, we understand this concept. Now, I'm not going to go, I expect you to go here. Go to Hebrews and look where the Hebrews writer is talking about Melchizedek. Without exception, the less is blessed of the greater. What does that mean? The priesthood of Aaron was less than the priesthood of Melchizedek. Why? Because the priesthood of Aaron, the Levitical priesthood, paid tithe to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek blessed the priesthood of Aaron, the priesthood of Levi. When? According to the Hebrews writer, while Levi was yet in Abraham's loins. You see, it's metaphorical, it's representative. You and I died. When? We died metaphorically. Whenever we were represented in the loins of Adam and Eve, whenever they were supposed to die. And the only reason we're allowed to be on this earth is because Jesus died on the cross, so God wouldn't have to do what he said he would do. He was able to show mercy because of the grace that would soon come. This is how important the Lord's Supper is. Now, your life, physical life, is because of Christ. As important to your life and your living, as important as eating physical food is to your physical existence, Christ is also as important to eating physical, to your existence as eating, your physical existence as eating food. A sound of thunder. Scott, I don't know what I was saying when you said that, so I'm a little confused. But anyway, so what we have now is whenever Jesus said, take this, and when you eat it, you think of my body, because without me dying on the cross, you wouldn't be alive. Romans chapter 5, verse 18. Oh, the sound. Okay, that was the Ray Bradbury book. I'm so sorry. I forgot I even mentioned that book. That's terrible. That's what I get for doing this not on the fly. I make general preparation, but a lot of this is extemporaneous. Anyway, good morning, Debbie Mangus. Good to see you. Yeah, Sound of Thunder. That was the Ray Bradbury book. It's a very interesting book. But anyway, so where was I? Oh yeah, Romans 5:18. Your justification of life is Christ. In other words, how can you justify being alive whenever Adam was supposed to die before he ever procreated? Because Jesus died. You see, Jesus really didn't die in my place. Jesus died in Adam's place. That's why Adam was the first Adam and Jesus is the last Adam. To satisfy the justice of God, a person who has never sinned must die, because Adam was supposed to have died. Now, what about the blood? Well, the blood is spiritual. So when you partake of that bread, you think about Jesus and the fact that because he did what he did, you're able to draw breath. You're able to justify your very existence. The love of Christ constraineth us. We thus judge, if one died for all, then we're all dead. But now we have this free gift of life that's come upon all men, mankind. What do you do with that life? Well, I'm going to give my life back to God. Oh, that's good. You got to kill yourself. What? Yeah, metaphorically. You see, we put that old man to death because we've sinned, and we bury dead bodies. So now we've buried that man of sin in a watery grave of baptism, and now that man is born again, not of corruptible seed, but of incorruptible by the word of God. That man has risen again to walk in newness of life. And now I'm going to spend every waking moment making up for lost time because the days are evil. I'm going to redeem the time. I've wasted God's time enough. I'm going to make up for lost time. Why are we able to do that? Well, that's because of the blood that was shed by Jesus. So you have in the Lord's Supper a physical and a spiritual lesson. Your life, both spiritually in this world, or physically in this world, and spiritually on into the next, is possible because of the death of Jesus Christ. The fact that he lived and died, and then he was resurrected. That blood of the new covenant, it continually flows. That's why it's better than the blood of bulls and goats.